All right. So, hey guys, I got here Miss L. She's is it ex dominatrix, dominatrix?
I go by former pro dom.
Okay. Well, there you go. Former pro dom, erotica author. I saw on your thing you're also a relationship counselor. You help people with their sex life, relationship, all that.
Yep, absolutely.
Sweet.
It's
So
all connected, baby.
there you go. Very true. Everything in life is connected. So yeah, I'd figure I'd get her on, talk about some interesting stuff, talk about some sex stuff, relationship stuff, BDSM stuff. Um, there you go. The feisty fun stuff.
Yeah. So where do you want to jump into?
Sweet. First question, actually. Your most recent videos I thought were super interesting. So you did the video breakdowns of the Love is Blind show on Netflix, which is popping right now. And you kind of
hmm
like talked about like the BDSM dynamics in that show. And you also said that, people don't think about this, but like every relationship has like dominant and like submissive elements to it. So I thought those are both cool concepts. If you want to talk about that, your thoughts on it, and
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, absolutely. Well, why I wanted to do the Love is Blind thing is to really, really illustrate that concept that kink is everywhere. If you watched any of my other YouTube videos, I have some content on there, and I tell my community this all the time, that it's a common misconception that the acts of BDSM, we kind of label BDSM like bondage, discipline, dominant submission,
Right. People who
sadomasochism.
don't know,
So
yeah.
a lot of people think that, right. So a lot of people go by that acronym and think that those activities specifically are what make up BDSM. But really, if we break it down, every single act of bondage, every single sadomasochistic activity, every single act that would take place in BDSM, you first have to have that pre-existing power exchange dynamic, because you've got to
Mhm.
know, am I going to be tying you up, or are you going to be tying me up? Am I going to be spanking you, or are you going to be spanking me? So we have to
Very
have
different,
those
yeah.
roles. Yeah, we have to have those roles already defined. And so when I saw that shifted everything for me, and I started really noticing that even in completely vanilla dynamics like we saw on Love is Blind, there's absolutely elements, maybe not completely discovered, maybe not completely communicated, maybe not completely exploited or expressed, but there are absolutely elements of dominance and submission that exist in every single person, and then in your relationship. I mean, you will notice that if you kind of just look in your friendships. Are you the dominant partner with your friends? Are you the one kind of making the decisions, or are you kind of the
Mhm.
one going, let's do this tonight, and are you the initiator? Are you the one doing these things in your friendships, or
That's
are your
super
friends the
interesting because
one
you're
kind of,
saying even
come
in
on?
platonic, yeah, even in platonic relationships, there's still that element of like maybe leadership, whoever like makes the calls, like, hey, we're gonna go to this restaurant, like this bar, and all that, and that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, literally every human interaction.
Absolutely. And so a lot of people will kind of push back at me and go, well, Miss L, they seem really vanilla. They seem like they're not very dominant, or they don't seem very submissive.
Yeah.
They're vanilla, Miss L. Not everyone is kinky. And to that I say, that is what we see when we're identifying a switch personality.
Mm.
So we either have dominant personality, we have submissive personality, or we have switch personality that can vacillate or switch between the two roles. And
Right.
so absolutely, sometimes in your friendships things might seem more vanilla just because you're chilling, it's more of an environment. But if you start breaking down who is usually the one to initiate, one to make plans, the one that's a little more fiscally responsible, who pays for the other deadbeat friend all the time, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
exists everywhere. And so when I was talking about that in Love is Blind, it was just so fascinating, because you watch that show and it's just like Vegas lights, obvious.
See, that's
So
funny
that's
because
why.
I didn't realize it watching it, but after watching your video, I'm like, oh, like you can see it
Did you
after
go
I really pay
back?
attention. I've watched like you put the highlights, right, or like the timers, and then I went through a little bit. I'm like, how did I miss this? But I kind of want to
Oh,
rewatch. I
really?
only watched the first two episodes. I'm gonna rewatch it after watching it because that's super interesting.
Dude, yeah, I'm so glad you saw that. So I guess that's where I'm like, I don't understand how people don't see. that
Mm.
it's everywhere. And so that is why I have such a passion for educating about this, because I have been on both sides of the switch. I started out as a 24/7 submissive, and I am a dominant switch. So that was a real stretch for me. And then I flipped my switch and I went into this professionally. And now I see so much relational benefit in just acknowledging what you are, what role you naturally have, and what role your partner naturally has.
No, that's super interesting. And that's my other question actually, because you have like the most interesting background ever. So you were, for people that don't know, maybe you're better explaining it, but you were in a 24/7 like dominant relationship, or I guess you were the submissive. Can you go into that? Explain first of all what that is, because it might, I would assume, blow people's mind that people do this. I just looked into it a bit. I like BDSM, but I'm not dwelled too much into it. I read a lot of posts on Reddit. They have like the BDSM community, and people talk a lot about this. So I've done a little bit of research, but if you could
Okay.
expand on that, how you got into that, and what was your experience, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So to that point, I want to talk about that real fast. You're like, I'm not super into it, but I'm a little into it. And I feel like that's a common misconception as well, that you have to be like dripping in liquid latex and flogging your partner to be
Right.
considered authentically kinky or truly into BDSM or whatever. And for me, I don't see that at all. And you've probably, if you've watched any of my YouTube videos, you've heard me say this, that BDSM is not a closet to come out of. It is a buffet to choose from. And so it's really all about what works for you, what works for your partner. And as you're going down this kinky buffet, if flogging isn't for you, if you're not super into pain, then you just pass on by that. You don't have to put that on your kinky plate. And
Right.
so I don't think BDSM is like a scale of 0 to kinky. It's just, hey, I like this. I prefer to engage with my partner in this way, so on and so forth. So circling back to your specific question,
Mhm.
I got into it because I was working as a personal trainer at the time.
Oh,
Did you just hit your vape, boy?
yeah, little good old little.
Yes. Okay. See, I'm trying to be professional and not be squirrely, so I can't smoke right now. But I will totally, as we're wrapping it up, I'll light it up with you.
You
But
got it.
so I started out as a personal trainer, and I knew as early as junior high, after watching an episode of CSI, believe it or not, that I was a dominant, that I was a alpha, like dominant of the
Awful.
dominants. Yes. And so I watched this episode and I was like, oh my gosh, at like 12, 13 years old, I realized I have this in me. I
Mm.
have this dominant energy in me, and I see things how this character sees things. Is amazing. But it just lay dormant for a while. And then I was working, obviously I was super young. Then I started working as a personal trainer, and I found myself not getting aroused, but entering Dom space, what I now know is Dom space, where I was getting this incredibly intense mental and emotional rush when my clients would come to me, would have a session with me, and I would break their bodies down in the gym. And they trusted me enough to let me do so. They trusted me enough to push them past their perceived limits. And that was so enticing to me. And once I started realizing, like, all our sessions actually went from me working them out to them often puking. Number one, I was known, I could make
God, yeah.
anyone puke. But after they'd throw up, their mind and their emotions would be so raw and so available that they would just break and they would just cry. And we would end up having this amazingly powerful counseling session
Of a personal training. That's
out
crazy.
of personal training. We would literally put the weights down, get up, get out of the gym, go in the stairwell, and spend the next 15, 20 minutes just coaching and counseling. And so I realized there's something to this. I'm getting breakthroughs with my clients in a way that no one else at the gym is.
Yeah, I've
And
never heard of that.
yeah, and so they even would hear my personal training voice, and now they call it my Dom voice. But yes, it was in me and it was just welling up. And so I was working as a personal trainer, and I was getting really, really just empowered by it. And at the time I was married, and it was a very toxic situation, very unhealthy. It was very much a pseudo dom who thought that he knew how to lead and how to be a dominant, but all he wanted was control.
Right. I read a lot about those.
And so that's again, and that's again why I talk so much about here's healthy dominance and here's abuse, because I've been there. And so he was the kind of guy that he wanted me to be the submissive wife. The submissive wife.
Good old housewife, yeah.
Yeah. And anyone who's spent even 5 minutes with me knows I love you, and I would love to care, and I love to serve, but there's nothing meek and mild about my energy. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna research. At the time that this really started kind of flaring up for me at the gym, I started researching BDSM, and then learning about what's called a taken in hand dynamic, which a lot of vanillas engage in, but they don't consider it BDSM. But really, it's a 24/7 BDSM relationship that just exists in a monogamous form within a marriage. And so I thought, okay, if I can maybe add an erotic or sexual element to my submission, it'll be easier for me. That's how I got, I stayed married for a long time, so I think it worked. But I guess that's a complicated question, because did it work? It worked in the fact that I was able to take on a level of submission that was not natural for me. But it did not work in the fact that I was taking on that level of submission thinking it was submission when I was really being a codependent victim.
Right. That's a big one.
And so to me, that was how it, looking back, I wasn't being submissive. I was being codependent, but I was labeling it as a 24/7 BDSM dynamic. And we were in a BDSM dynamic. It just wasn't healthy. And so did that for a few years. And when I went through a major life transition, that's when I kind of went, it's time to flip my switch a little bit. Mm-hmm. I've had all of this in me for all of these years that I could not express in my marriage. It's time to bring it out.
All came out.
And it all came out. And that's when I started doing this professionally and started working with submissive clients professionally. And it really, and I talked to a lot of my girls about this, it really helped bring me out of that codependent, abused, meek, mild, neglected, abandoned, little kind of scared mentality.
And I empowered you.
Yes, absolutely. For the first time in many, many years.
No, that's super interesting. I'm curious if you don't mind elaborating more on like maybe the toxic dynamics, right? Because as we both said, like this is very common these days for people to, I don't know, there's, like you said, there's a very common element to humans that they want to dominate, they want that level of control, but there's definitely a healthy way of doing it and an unhealthy way of doing it. And a lot of relationships, there's that default thing of either, the man is like controlling, wants the wife to, do the dishes, all this, you get no say, or on the opposite end, I'm very curious what you think about this. You have the woman could also be very controlling, maybe like nagging, like shaming, kind of like authoritarian almost. So yeah, like why is this so common? Like why do we not talk about this? But this is like rampant in a lot of relationships that I see.
Yeah. I think that, I don't know if everyone's going to love this answer, but I think what I see is social media has created a social construct and way of relating that has made us incredibly selfish and incredibly almost narcissistic, because it is just a swipe right culture. If we don't like exactly how this person looks, then we get to judge you and compare you to the next person. And so I feel like we all feel constant comparison. We all feel constantly judged, and we all feel constantly powerless to the whims of others. And I think when anyone is if anyone who has been abandoned, anyone who's been neglected, anyone who's been abused, anyone who's been bullied, anyone who's been suffered emotional pain, the moment they get in a position of power,
Right. It's their chance for revenge.
it's their chance to finally exert power. And so I think we have a lot of people who haven't had the best backgrounds or relationships, and we just keep paying it forward. And we keep paying it forward in really insidious kind of, especially with narcissism, really covert, sneaky ways. And that was me. And I think that a lot of people don't talk about it because you don't realize it's happening to you.
That's a good point. Yeah. People think it's normal. It's like healthy. Oh, he loves me so much. I was watching Dr. Phil, and I think the girl was literally not joking. He's like, he cares so much about me that he beats me. And I was like, what did I just hear? Like, it's usually not that extreme, but people think it's normal. It's love when it's like infatuation and like toxic, like bonds and all that stuff.
Yes. And that was absolutely me. I mean, I met this guy at a very, very young age, got married at a very, very young age. Like, I would have smacked myself, looking back. And so, just ignorance, just a little girl who didn't know what she was doing, and ignorance. And then I just got trapped in this, and people don't talk about it because you don't realize it's happening to you when it's happening to you. And then when you get out of it, a lot of victims are still so brainwashed and still feel so victimized and powerless that they don't talk about it. And so that's why I think it's really, really important. And so for me, what I delineate with my community is I try to explain that there's a difference between being in control and being controlled. There's a difference between wanting to protect because you care and being protective because you want control.
Right.
And so when it comes to healthy dominance, I tell my subs all the time, you guys have got to look at the character. You've got to look at the consistency of behavior here and the behavioral patterns that you're dealing with. So for me, the behavioral patterns that were happening, that toxic patterns that were happening, a lot of gaslighting. He was a master gaslighter. Tons of minimization, tons of projection. It was intense financial abuse. I did not have any money of my own. I did not have access to accounts. I mean, and that's what happens when you're isolated, when you're being controlled, you have no way of reaching out. And so a lot of victims, if by miraculous means they get out of it, they're still so fucked up in the head that they feel guilty. They feel responsible.
The trauma lasts a long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
the next
absolutely.
relationship, if you don't address it oftentimes.
Yeah. Yep. I tell my people all the time, don't bring past pain. Don't project that past pain onto your present partner. But we do it all the time. Like you said, we do it all the time. And so that's why, like we kind of opened up with, it's all connected. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, it's all connected. And that's why empathy and mindfulness are so, so important. So important.
Definitely. I co-sign that. A lot of relationships, it seems to be very hard to connect with another person. It brings all of our best parts and bad parts out. So oftentimes what happens, like I was in a relationship last year, my longest one for about a year. And the first few months were great, fantastic, like the honeymoon phase, like we didn't fight at all. And after that, like there was more like the toxic elements came in, both of my flaws and her flaws came out, and there was just like a mismatch. So I've had to take some time to just kind of like reflect after that and just learn like what was my part in that, like what can I fix in myself so that, if I start dating another girl, like we just don't do the same thing over and over again, because that would just be, well, if you don't learn from your mistakes, then what's the point in ever making them?
Absolutely. Yeah. You will enter your new season how you left your old season. So that's very wise of you to do the inner work before you jump into a new relationship. But most people don't do that. But I do have a curiosity question for you. I know that you're supposed to be, asking me questions, but my question, can you pinpoint the power dynamics in your relationship that you were talking about?
Interesting.
Oh,
It was, I think it was that's a good question, actually. It was a little bit of both. I think I'm naturally kind of a switch because we both were, she was a very
I
fierce
pegged
girl
you
for
as the
sure.
dominant switch.
Interesting, interesting. I'd say that that's pretty accurate. Specifically in like in the bedroom when we're having sex, I'm very dominant. I've never been really sexually submissive. But in the relationship, I kind of like it's not let's lead the way, and I'll just make sure that whatever we do like is cared for. But like she would kind of like shoot the calls, and she was fierce girl. This girl is interesting, but she was like super submissive as well. But she had that like tough girl like outer shell type thing. So it was a bit of both. Like that was super interesting for me.
So it sounds like maybe you had two dominant switches. And I get that question a lot. Can two switches be in a relationship together? Can two dominants be in a relationship together? Can two submissives be in a relationship? Can two switches?
That's a good one, yeah.
And for me, I think absolutely. I think if you have two humble people who know that they don't know it all and are willing to learn and grow and have some empathy, absolutely. Two submissives can be together, two dominants can be together, two switches can be together. However, there will still be in those two, like if I was accurate, if you were accurate with your two dominant switches, you know, there's still one that's slightly more so in certain areas and slightly more so in others. Like you pinpointed with yourself, that might be your level of switch, where in vanilla life and just everyday life, you take on more of a submissive role because you genuinely like making people happy, or you genuinely just don't really have preferences on those particular things, or you just are naturally more easygoing, relaxed, phlegmatic.
Yeah, that's an
But
interesting one. Sorry to cut you off. I just have a because that's super related. Because to me, what it felt like is I didn't really care what we were doing, right? Like I just wanted to like be with her, have a good time. Like I'm just whatever we do, whether we go have a drink or like just go to McDonald's, have a walk, like whatever. So I would go with kind of like what she wants, because then she had more like, hey, I want to do this today, like this today. So I'm kind of like more with the flow. Would you call that like submissive of me? Like, is that what you would describe that as?
I would definitely see that you are a switch and that she was a switch, but she preferred to take on a dominant role in your vanilla life, and you responded to that. So you followed her lead in your just normal everyday life. But then the moment it became sexual, the whole dynamic shifted. And so all of that, like, yeah, I've been going along with what you want to do because I genuinely just, I'm easygoing. I'm relaxed about it. But then all that fire that you still have inside got an outlet there. So yeah, it definitely seems
Interesting.
like two switches.
Okay, cool. Okay, follow-up question then. I would assume, I think the answer is yes, but you can have different relationships with different types of people, right? Because in that relationship with her, like that was the case. But for example, with friends, I'm usually the one that's like, hey, I want to go there. Like I'm more a dominant one. But with that girl in particular, then that was the case, right? So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That just proves that you are a switch. Typically, people who are not switches will be either dominant with every single person that they're engaging with, or submissive with every single person they're engaging with. So for me, and I think pretty much everyone that I'm in a relationship will tell you this, I don't really get submissive with the people that I'm in relationship with, whether you are in a parental or family kind of role, if you're a friend, if you're a business colleague kind of situation. I very rarely do I feel soft and soften underneath someone just in like everyday life.
Right.
But with my partner, that's a completely different thing. There's something about him and our connection because he's a switch, but he's way more of a dominant on his switch than I am. And so with him, he kind of naturally stays in this dominant space, and I don't want to top that. So I just kind of go, okay, I'm just going to rest underneath you. So even though in my normal vanilla relationships, I'm dominant, even with him in a vanilla situation, I switch into a submissive space. So the whole DS roles and dynamic and how you switch when you switch is very, very organic, and it will shift based on who you're with at the time if you are a true switch.
Interesting. No, that's a good way
Yeah.
to put it. Yeah. I like that you said that some people bring out like the dominant side of you, some people bring out the submissive side of you. That's a good insight.
Yeah. And bullies always bring out my dominant side. Bullies and people who have no empathy, I can't turn my dominance off when that happens. So yeah, absolutely. Even certain triggers, like certain things will make me feel submissive, certain scents or certain movies will make me feel submissive, or certain songs or things will make me feel dominant. So I'm a very balanced switch. So I kind of go like this all the time.
Interesting. I can kind of
Mhm.
relate.
Really?
All
How so?
right. Different things, for example, specifically with a girl, right? If she's being like okay, here's my thing that not a lot of people get. Okay, really like aggressive women, or like girls that are like super confident and like even sometimes arrogant, make me feel dominant. I kind of want to like maybe
Yep.
break them is not the best way to put it, but you know, kind of
No,
like
no, no,
I
I
like
know.
that to it. Yeah.
No, that's totally, and that's why I said, even in our interactions and how you reached out to me through email, you communicated like a dominant.
Interesting.
You
Interesting.
communicated like a dominant, but as we were communicating, you also showed me that you were just very easygoing, and you made me feel very safe and very comfortable right off the bat. And so I could tell that you were operating on this level when you were talking with me, very respectful, very dominant, but not trying to top me. I could just tell you were just dominant. You were just confident and assured in what you were saying. Whereas a submissive man would email me completely differently, completely. So
Interesting.
communication is, pay attention to the cues.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear. But even through email, hey, that's fascinating. I've never actually pondered that.
Oh,
So you can tell even the way people like
yeah.
text or just email or interact, like even in small things like email or social media.
Yeah, I'm also, so I told you I'm an INFJ, so I'm an intuitive empath, and I have been honing that skill for a long time, and I've been really working on micro expressions a lot as well, which came in super handy when I was a dominatrix professionally. And that's kind of a skill that a lot of natural dominants have, that I've experienced at least, that you kind of have an ability intuitively to read people. And I know you have this skill. You have this skill. And that little smile tells me so. You have this skill where you can just intuitively read people, read energy, and you can feel it shift. And so I can do that just because I've done this for many, many years. I mean, I've done a lot of research. I've had a lot of submissive clients. I work with people in the lifestyle every day. And so, yeah, at this point, I've actually had, I was broadcasting on Twitch there for a while, and I had a couple of people actually come into my stream and say just a couple little lines.
Mhm.
And I was able to tell, this is how either you're feeling right now, this is your dominant side, this is your submissive side. And I was able to tell them exactly, kind of pinpoint where they were in their headspace. And they were like, how can I literally, you've never met me, I just got here, it's been less than 5 minutes, how were you able to do that? And it's kind of the same thing that I hopefully illustrated in my Love is Blind videos. Pay attention. Kink is everywhere. Just pay attention. People say what they say for a reason. People use the words they choose for a reason. And so when you just stop and observe, you can really pick up on how someone communicates from a dominant perspective or from a submissive perspective.
That's
Especially
cool.
good communicators like you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
No, that's interesting. I need to look more into that. I know that people are kind of blind, or a lot of, if you don't look, if you don't open your eyes, you miss a lot of things. So that's so interesting. To kind of pivot a little bit, I have another question that
Yeah.
it's a bit more maybe emotionally charged.
Okay.
People, especially I'm on Twitter a lot. I find it super, super hilarious. But people debate a lot on like the natural roles of like men and women, right? So, are men naturally more dominant? Are women naturally more submissive? Obviously, there's a mix of both. Do you see trends, or like what's your perspective on that?
I see, here's the biggest trend. If you're gonna talk about a trend, I think here's the biggest trend that I saw. How we have this like global Women's Day, women empowerment, feminism, all of this, okay?
Right,
Then
definitely.
at the same time, 50 Shades of Grey, which is completely abusive, eroticized bullshit, sold how many millions of copies?
The best-selling book of all time, right, or something like that.
Well, let's not say that. So anyway, so that, talk about a trend. Let's talk about a dichotomy, because I think that's the biggest tell. Not the trends, because trends change, especially how social trends evolve nowadays is just crazy. So I don't want to look at trends. I want to look at dichotomies. I want to look at when things should be adding up, but they don't. So to me, that was the biggest thing. And that was a huge tell that women, even feminists, I dare say, have this desire to be pursued by a man of passion and respectful aggression.
I like how you put that. That's good.
Okay. And so that's what I saw, is that even it's like this feminist narrative has just like been driving it home that like women should be strong and powerful, and the future is female and all of this. And I think that has actually, yes, women rock it, do your thing, be powerful, be badass, absolutely. But I think it has maybe not limited, but maybe made women feel like they have to stifle their true desires.
Right.
Doesn't make you
They can't admit that they want to be a bit more submissive or be cared for. Like, it's like, I don't need no man, all that stuff, right?
exactly. And so for me, that was what I saw. Like, it does not make you as a woman any less strong or empowered or feisty for you to have the desire to completely let go sexually, mentally, emotionally to a strong alpha male that you can trust.
I think the trust part is huge
But
too.
I think a lot of women, yeah. And maybe that's where we're missing it. Maybe it's the trust thing. And I've seen with a lot of women who've come to my community that they have this desire so bad, but they were submissive at one point, and they were submissive to an abuser dressed in dom's clothing. And so they're scared and they don't want to soften anymore because they're scared to be soft. Women who have been sexually abused and so on and so forth. It's like we're so scared to have that desire again. We're just going to be this cold hard bitch. But we're not actually addressing the fear. And so that's what I saw. I feel like if you want to talk about a trend, I feel like the trends have created this dichotomy where we're all kind of scared to share what we really feel.
Vulnerability. People don't want to let their real self out.
Yeah. And so that's what I tell my people all the time is there's a flow to this. Safety, trust, vulnerability, intimacy. Intimacy is the goal. Intimacy is into me, you see. Intimacy is I can be known and accepted fully without fear. That's what we all really, really want. But it is the best thing, right? And so we do that. We want that, but we neglect the first three steps: safety, trust, vulnerability. You can never get intimate with someone unless you're vulnerable, like you were just saying. But you can never get vulnerable with someone if you do not trust that person. And you can never build trust with someone unless you feel safe with that person, feel safe enough to spend the time building that trust. And so I think that is the biggest thing, not so much about gender roles and things like that, but I think we're all really fucking scared. And so I want to create a community that, you know what, if you are a strong, feisty woman and you secretly have this desire to submit, but you're too scared right now, I want you to have a safe place to work through that. If you're a submissive man who wants to be a sissy, great. I want you to have a safe place for you to work through that. If you are an alpha man who is just really wanting to care for a submissive woman without being judged for it, without being called toxic and all of these things, I want that safety too. And so that's kind of my goal, is no matter if you believe in the traditional gender roles or you don't, I want you to be able to express whatever it is you feel.
No, I like that a lot. That's huge. That's partly where I reached out to you, just like acceptance and just owning people for who they are and like not shaming them, whatever their thing is. I think we need a hell of a lot more of that in today's society.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah.
both sides, right? So like you have the women submissive side that's judge. You have a man, if you're wanting to be submissive, you know, not a real man. You're like all this, like it's just
So good. Yes.
toxic and all sides.
Have you gotten that? Because I'm not saying that you're not this like powerful man here, but I do see a tenderness in you. I do see a sweetness in you. I do see an emotional intelligence in you that is rare. So I want to applaud you. But have you ever received that narrative that you weren't a badass enough, that you weren't an alpha male enough? Like, have you been on the bad side of that narrative?
Definitely. Well, like I said a bit earlier, I come from like the gaming community, right? I used to be like a pro gamer for a little bit. So there's the huge stereotype of, you know, nerdy guys and like can't get girls and like you're not a man and all this. So I kind of switched on the complete opposite and I got into, you know, like seduction and like learning to like, you know, pick up girls and like showing that, you know, being bringing the dominance out, learning to like bring that. And there's a lot of personally, yeah. I got involved in like the red pill community for a while. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, and
Yeah.
it's very toxic, right? They have this strong ideology where like anything that you do that is beta or like weak, they like demonize you for it. So I kind of like had to get through that, kind of like get in the flow of myself and like what I want to do, because I don't want to be like fully like dominant and like authoritarian all the time. Like that's fun once in a while, but I like both sides, you know, just like cuddling on the couch with a girl is like amazing. Like I'll see that all day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely, yeah, it's been a journey for me. And that's why I also wanted to do this, to just be vulnerable, share that also, and just help other people. Cause like, I'm not too worried about myself at this point, but a lot of guys that I see, are still in that phase where they can't own themselves. They're shamed by other people. And then in turn, they shame themselves, right? Which I think is the worst part.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been my experience for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with that on your end. Like, it's remarkable how many men who aren't just total dominant alpha male and honestly like cold assholes, quite honestly. A lot of people think like if you are just a cold, heartless asshole that just goes around controlling people and barking orders but wears a suit, you're a dominant. And it's crap. It's total bullshit. And so thank you for one sharing that. Like, it's amazing how many submissive men, or not just overtly dominant men, come into my community, or who I've worked with in my role as a professional dominatrix, who that was the first space that they've ever been able to be accepted for being soft.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And honestly, like, more times than not, my first sessions with my subs would end in tears, because it would be so intense for them to finally be able to open up into me, you see, and to not feel like I have to be this toxic, overtly aggressive male to have any respect. And, you know, you said something very interesting, you know, that you want to, you know, be that dominant, powerful every once in a while, but other things are fun too. And it's just as fun to you to snuggle with a girl on the couch. Let me drop this on you. Snuggling with a girl on the couch is no less dominant than the other thing you had in mind.
That's fair. No, I definitely don't feel submissive doing it, but it's a bit more, you know, like soft, you know, maybe not soft, but I don't know, cutesy, you know, just having a girl at a ex come over and we just like cuddled, and like that was amazing to me. Like sex is amazing too.
Caretaking. It's caretaking. And that makes you an incredibly good dominant. And there are actually styles of dominance that specifically speak to that. They're called soft dom. They're called daddy dom. So you don't have to be this like a just completely ridiculous, like ego tripping dude to be dominant. And actually, if you are this controlling ego tripping dude, you're not a dominant. You're a controlling ego tripping dude dressed up like a dominant. So to you and all of the other dominant males out there that don't overtly express, like, you know, you're just as valid. And you're amazing. And we need you. And trust me, the girls in my community, they're always coming to me talking about, I just want care. I just want to be loved. And I just want someone to care for me. That's what they're looking for. But yes, little communities like the Red Pill community and the incels and such, they just totally throw you under the bus for being a good man. Sorry, now you got me on my soapbox.
No, that's a good point. I feel bad for the incels too. That's kind of a different part. Like these guys.
Don't get me started on that rant.
What do you think? Give me a short version. I'm curious, actually. I like this topic.
Okay. I think that it is a subculture created in victimization. Mm. And I think any community that makes your identity victimization, you're already stepping back.
Agreed.
And so I think it's really pathetic for men who have no emotional intelligence, who have no skills in communicating or seducing a woman, or are still, you know, 35 years old living in their parents' basement on their mom and dad's check, and yet they want to blame women for not wanting them because they feel so entitled to sex.
Do you think it's an entitlement, or just because when I look at that Reddit, I just see a lot of like pain, you know, like these guys, they don't know how to fix things. And then, yeah, the victim thing is huge. They have this whole like crab in the bucket where like, if you say, hey, like I went on a date and like, you know, I'm starting to meet this girl, like some people are like, you know, that's great. But a lot of people get mad at you. Like they get like furious. They're like, get out of here. Like, we don't want you anymore. We don't do this. You know, this is not worth it. Same thing with like the MGTOW and the Red Pill. So it's.
Well, how is that not entitlement? How is that not entitlement? If you think about it, if you feel like you are intrinsically owed something and you don't get it, but someone else does, that's going to make you mad, isn't it?
True. I guess put it that way, yeah.
And so that's what I see is they're not willing to stop victimizing themselves and to just learn how to communicate and be emotional and just do a little bit of self-improvement. We all need to do a little bit of self-improvement.
Amen.
We all need it. And so like, that's the thing especially in the DS world, in the BDSM world, like if you have gotten to the place as a dominant that you feel like you know it all, you're not going to give your submissive a good experience. And so that it kind of all plays in. Like, you got to be humble enough to know that I can still improve. I can still grow. I can still learn. And so that to me is, you wanted a little bit, maybe I gave you a little bit more than what you wanted. But did I answer your question?
No, that was good. So that would be your advice for these type of people. Just like humble yourself, better yourself, don't put responsibility on, especially not the whole fucking gender, just more yourself, and like improve yourself.
I think my advice, yeah, would definitely be that. But I think more than anything, disconnect from everyone that is fueling this victimization. Like, find empowering people. Find a community that will empower you. Find a community of good, strong men that will go, hey, I know that that girl didn't accept you, or she rejected you, or she didn't, say yes to your date. Bro, you're okay. It's just one. It's just one. You're still great. You're still amazing. We're still going to go out and hang out, and you still have so much to offer. If you're feeling insecure about your performance here or this or that, I can help you, and I can surround you, and I can empower you. But that is not what we see. And so, yeah, that to me is just like, love yourself. More than anything, my advice would be love yourself, boys, to not want to victimize yourself anymore.
I like that.
Because it'll just keep you trapped. It'll keep you trapped.
Well, there we go. We delve into incel advice. We do that.
Oh, God.
Okay, we went on a few interesting tangents, but I want to get back to your story because that was super interesting. So you started getting into like pro-doming. How did you first get into that? Did you get on like FetLife, or like find someone on Craigslist like that wanted to like be whipped? Like, just
Oh, no, it all happened on Instagram.
Really?
Yeah. So I was, so backtracking a little bit. When I was doing personal training, and as I started really delving into learning about BDSM and how to really bring out my dominant side, as well as operate in the submissive space, etc., I decided, okay, I want to go into life coaching, and I want to get life coaching credentials so that when my clients do break down, I can actually help them. And so I went to school and got my coaching credentials and started actually a business doing life coaching. And I was using Instagram as to kind of build my platform up a little bit. And then when I transitioned, I thought, you know what, I can still coach in just kind of a different form, but I want to focus on this. And so I basically just took my former Instagram platform and started just connecting with other kink accounts. And in a matter of days, I had just lists of DMs.
Really? That's crazy.
And it was, what I really liked is these were men all over the world. And so what was really cool for me as a writer and as a logophile, a lot of these men, as part of like their submissive tasks or protocols, wanted my help in actually like teaching them English as their second language as well. And so it really, my practice became just, I really don't even know how to explain it. It just a global connection of just like amazing growth.
That's about the last answer I expected, but that's super interesting.
Yeah. What were you expecting?
Well, a lot of people, myself included, when you think about, like a dominatrix or like a dom, you would expect like the cliche advice of like, a dark dungeon, like, whips and like all that. But I guess what you were saying, it was more, definitely more like the DS dynamic, and a lot of it was online, you were saying. So it was more about like your authority, kind of like coaching them.
The vast majority of my clients were online. And not even because I was trying to do it that way. It was because they found me online and went, I'm in India and I have no France, or and they had no way of experiencing this in their physical location.
I wouldn't think so, not in India.
Yeah. And so that's really how it kind of started. And, I did enjoy, like, if I did have a local person, I did enjoy an in-person session, but I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need it to get into your head. I don't need it to own you. And so that's what I loved, is I was like managing like all of these men from like all over the world and getting a different experience from each of their different styles of submission,
Hmm. Yeah, that's
and
fascinating.
experiencing the cultural differences that affect BDSM too, which was amazing.
So it was a good like learning opportunity for you to like refine your craft and just get more exposure to the world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love being connected, and I love creating a community that no matter what our differences are, no matter where we are in the world, we can gather and we can connect. And so, yeah, it was a really beautiful thing. And like I was saying before, that season was really healing and really cathartic for me, coming out of that long-term season of trying to fit into a role that was not me.
Hmm. You keep referring to seasons. So does that to you that just mean like cycles of life, like periods of your life that you've been through?
Yeah, some people refer to it as chapters or whatever. I like to think of it as seasons, because seasons have kind of a sensory element to me. From a word perspective, there have been seasons in my life that felt very, very cold and
Hmm.
felt very barren. And then there have been seasons in my life where I felt like the sun came back out and I was getting warmed up again. You know what I mean? And then there are seasons of pruning, where like the fall, where the leaves are falling and it's a season of pruning, and there's a season of growth and springtime. And so I like to view my life that way very much. Yeah, it's just kind of my own personal preference for my verbiage.
Yeah. It's poetic. It's almost like a metaphor.
I'm glad you think so.
Okay, so how's what are you up to now? Like, cause you were doing that mostly in the past, or do you still do it now? Like, what's your
Oh,
thing now?
no. So what I'm focusing on now is I wanted to create content to help couples connect in a healthy way, and especially help kinky couples connect in a healthy way. And so that's when I started. I mean, I had been writing as long as I can remember, but when I got with my guy, and he really encouraged me, hey, why don't you start sharing some of your writing?
Mm.
And when he planted that seed, I saw I saw in my coaching sessions and the people in my community coming to me just talking about how pornography was really affecting their relationship in a negative way, how of disconnection that they were feeling, the amount of constant comparison, like what's wrong with me, what am I doing so wrong? And I thought there's a better way. There's a better way. I'm not going to support sex trafficking, and I'm not going to support the dissolution of relationships either. So I wanted to create something to connect couples. And I was also thinking, okay, these ladies, they're feeling very damaged and very hurt and very insecure about their guys watching these images, watching these videos, but yet they're reading these stories that have incredibly explicit content about characters. So it's, to me, I was like, okay, ladies, you're feeling insecure about what your men may be doing, but at the same time, you're reading these highly explicit stories and fantasizing about these men. So he has sexual needs and you guys are disconnected, and you have sexual needs and you're disconnected. Why can't we do it together? Why can't we find a way to explore our fantasies together? So that's why I write how I write. And that's why I started publishing this year is, well, I mean, on Amazon this year, but we got started on Instagram about a year and a half ago. Yeah. And that was my goal of this current content. And what I'm doing right now is I wanted to give couples a really great creative way to explore some new territory that might be intimidating or scary or overwhelming or whatever. And so that's why my stories are written without characters. They're written without physical descriptions of the characters, because I want every single person who reads my stories to be able to view yourself and your partner in the story.
Huh. I've not taken too deep of a look on the erotica side, but so you're saying they're like couple story, like they're meant for like both people to like read them together and kind of like fantasize together, or like...
That's how I write. Now, traditional erotica is, whether it's a novel or a short story or whatever, it's very much written how novels are written, how short stories are written. You have your character development, you have, your character descriptions, and you go on a journey with your characters. You get to know your characters, you fall in love with your characters, etc. So for me, I wanted to take all that, kind of throw it out and go, I don't need to give you characters to give you an experience. Because if I can create the emotion and can create the experience, you will put yourself into it.
Right. They become the character through your story.
And that is the goal, because we do that all the time when we watch movies. I mean, how many movies have you watched where you start getting emotional or getting feisty or whatever because you're relating to something in that character? So I think we do it all the time without even realizing it. And so for me, I just wanted to do it with intention.
No, I like that. That's super unique.
Good. And you know what? I'll send you a book. I will send you a signed copy of my book.
Gladly. I'll read it. That's interesting.
Nice.
Cool. How much more time do you have, by the way? Are you still going good? I got a few more questions.
Hey,
not too strapping.
Baby, I am all yours. Ask away.
I like it. All right. I got something a bit more topical for what's going on in the situation. A lot of couples are stuck together. Actually, my roommate brought his friend, and he's working intentionally. Like, he had the option to stay at home or to work, and he chose to work because he's like, I don't want to be stuck with my wife all the time. We're just going to get in fights. So it seems like for a lot of people, it's a challenging time. They're not used to spending a lot of time together. So do you have advice for couples when they're quarantined on how to make a relationship stronger and not weaker in these times?
Okay, so remember when I said that some of my best connections and best communications have been with INTPs?
Yeah.
Okay, here's why. You asked me that question, and I literally have already made a YouTube video that's coming out tomorrow all about this.
No way.
Yes. So tomorrow's YouTube video, which I can go into it a little bit here if you'd like, but tomorrow's YouTube video is my top 10 tips for distance dynamics and quarantine kinks. So I'm seeing the same thing. If you and your partner are normally used to going to work separately, leaving the house, all of that, you're not used to being together all the time, you might start to get a little short, a little annoyed, a little, all these things. So I go over my 5 tips for if you're stuck together with your partner. And I also have 5 tips if you and your partner are stuck away from each other. So one of the things that I said is take time away. Like, even if you can't get out of the house, I think the biggest tip is to don't mesh your schedules. So many couples, just because like, oh, you don't have anywhere to go, I don't have anywhere to go, will just like kind of mesh their routines and start doing things in tandem, maybe not even, without realizing it. So that's the biggest thing. Like, I would suggest that every couple right now have your own routine. If you are staying in the same house, have your own routine and literally schedule time away from your partner. If you don't have a big space to do it, put up a sheet, hang a sheet, but just get away from the side of them for a little while. Like, literally physically be out of their presence for a chunk of time every day, I think is super big. I also, for the kinksters specifically, and I went over this in tomorrow's YouTube video as well, this would be a great opportunity for the kinksters to try a 24/7 dynamic. So you were asking about that earlier, a 24/7 dynamic versus just a scene-to-scene dynamic. Really, that's the delineation. So you have some couples in kink, in BDSM, who only really pull out their dominant or submissive side or express dominant submissive kinks sexually. That's more of a scene to scene basis. Then you have some couples that really love the connection and eroticism that their 24/7 dynamic, basically them operating in their dominant and submissive role with protocols and expectations that are agreed upon by both parties every day, all day. And so for those couples who are more casual in their kinky play, I think this would be a great opportunity to maybe turn it into a 24/7 dynamic. And I say that because the dominant, if you have a really playful, bratty, feisty, submissive on your hands that's bored, that's restless, that just wants to play and pounce and be cute, like you as the dominant can, if you do step into a 24/7 situation, can put together a daily routine for your submissive, a daily schedule for your submissive, with maybe blackout times where sir needs to work, daddy needs to work, this is do not disturb time. And it can really create a lot of intimacy in and eroticism in really vanilla ways. Like if a protocol, you know, 24/7 protocol is submissive is to wake up at 7 a.m. and then submissive is to, you know, brush her teeth and do yoga for 30 minutes and then make dominant breakfast. And the dominant would like this specific breakfast. If that is kind of something that you engage in, then every time the submissive does yoga, we're going to think about that connection.
Right. Make it exciting instead of boring.
Yes. Yes. And so we're going to think about, oh, maybe I don't really want to do this right now, but my master wants me to do this right now and I want to please him. And so it becomes a very erotic way of engaging, even in normal everyday vanilla means. So those would be my two biggest things. If you want the rest of the tips, you'll have to watch the video tomorrow. But yes, I would say take space and try out a 24/7 dynamic.
Very good. No, I like that. Okay, I have a little pet theory to run by you. Kind of relates to this.
Okay.
Because I noticed, like I said, I get a lot of feedback from people or like read online, and it seems my theory is that a lot of couples, they don't like each other that much. They're maybe to be blunt. For example, you have the classic stereotype of the man who's like glad to get away from his wife, who like, you know, she talks too much, and like I kind of feel like it relates to where you're talking about with the intimacy and the vulnerability thing. Maybe they didn't get to that stage, so the relationship is a bit superficial. For example, with my ex, like maybe we didn't get to that point, but I could hang out with her for like hours and hours and hours, and she would talk to me about what I usually would consider complete nonsense. Like she would just tell me about her day at work and like this girl said this and this guy said this, and I'm like, usually that's nonsense, but just because it was coming from her, like, you know, I liked her so much as a person, so just her experience of going through the world was like fascinating to me. Or she would tell me about TV. What did she used to watch? Like Toddlers and Tiara, which, you know, not my thing, but you know, like she thought about it was like so cool. So I'm curious if that's like just a me thing, or like some people like they're just not that connected, so they don't enjoy each other that much. So especially in times like this, maybe they'll have a hard time. But even in regular times, I'm curious what do you think on that?
I think that the DS dynamic can solve a lot of what you're speaking to, specifically in the instance of the guy who just needs to get away from his woman because she is just too intense, too much, etc. That is not a matter of maybe the couple disliking each other, or maybe not the couple getting to a certain level of intimacy, but that couple are butting heads because they have not realized the power exchange dynamics that are at play. In that instance, what you just shared with me, we have two dominants that are butting heads. And when two dominants are butting heads, we're going to go like this. When you have two leaders, right? We have two leaders. One leader is going to go this way. One leader is going to go this way, right? Because we're both leading. And then we have a disconnection. If we have two submissive parties together, one is just going to wait on the other one to move, but this one's going to wait on the other one to move, and we're never going to get anywhere. And so that is the importance of, and why I say this is everywhere. This dynamic is absolutely everywhere. And that's the importance of understanding it and exploiting it in your own relationship. Is in that situation, what I would advise is, okay, you clearly have a dominant man. Doesn't sound like he is submissive in any way just because you said he wants to get away from her nagging or from her intensity. If it was a switch man or a submissive switch man or just a submissive, he would yield to that intensity rather than wanting to pull away from it. So that tells me we have a staunch dominant man here. Okay, so then we go over to the female part. Okay, well, she might be a switch. Most, in my experience, most women are. Most even dominant women have a switch side where they get fucking tired and they want to be taken care of at one point in time. So my theory is that there's a little bit of switch in every woman, a little bit. It could be a tiny, 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 tiny bit. But I feel like even if that's the case, if you have a tiny little bit of a submissive in a dominant woman or a little bit of a switch, what's happening in that situation is she's not recognizing her alpha male. And she isn't wanting to soften under the alpha male. So she's trying to match the alpha male. And it's driving him away. And so I think that it may not be a matter of we don't like each other. We may reach that feeling of dislike only because we keep doing this. We're not getting anywhere. We're not connecting because we're butting heads. And so maybe that is more of the issue. Is not that we have two people that dislike each other. We have two people that genuinely want to be together. But we haven't recognized our power exchange dynamics that are actually fueling our engagements, and we're just disconnecting. And when we're disconnected, we feel frustrated. We feel sometimes anxious, sometimes angry. But all of these are disconnecting feelings. That's how I see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. To me, the not liking thing was the obvious answer, but power exchange dynamics, I wouldn't have thought of that. Huh.
Does that make sense, or do you feel like I'm totally full of shit?
I think you're on a point. Yeah, because a lot of guys, maybe they're women. I like what you said, the word intensity, right? The girl's like intense. Maybe she came. Okay, how would you describe this, right? Like a girl, woman comes back from work, like she's got pent up emotion. She needs to vent, right? Would you consider that specifically dominant or submissive, or is that just what would you call that?
It depends on the girl and it depends on how she's venting. But I think the act of venting in of itself is just releasing frustration. You can have a submissive vent and you can have a dominant vent. So really, that isn't enough for me to go off of. It would be more of, what is she venting about? What really got under her skin that day? Was it because this disrespectful guy at work who always gets the credit for everything and she works twice as hard? You see what I'm saying? Is she frustrated about that? Or is she frustrated about the fact that somebody parked in her parking space and then someone made a dirty comment or gave her a nasty look or whatever? Do you see the two mentalities there?
Right.
So it's more about what are they venting about at that point.
Once again, I'm learning. That's interesting. Dual types of venting. Okay, so basically every action then is kind of like one or the other, in a way that is expressed in a relationship. So it's not enough. The action is not enough to determine. Okay.
It's very organic. It's very fluid. And if you have really balanced switches, like I'm pretty balanced as a switch. And so I can be, in Dom space until 10, 11 a.m. And then I watch something really sweet and sad and makes me soft. And then I'm like, okay, I just want someone to snug me for a couple of hours. And then, I'll be like, okay, enough of that. Let's get shit done. So it's all you. It's all how you are wired, what kind of day you're having, all of that. But like I'm saying, that's for switches. For staunch dominants or strict submissives, it's going to be more of a consistent response or reaction.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Let's kind of switch topic a bit back to like the relationship advice stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm a bit younger. I'm 24. Do you have advice for people around that age, or I guess in general, that maybe are not comfortable with their partner to express either, their sexuality or like some BDSM wishes? I see a lot of people that have either like fantasies that they want to express that they're really just not comfortable sharing with their partner. And that kind of kills me, right? Because you're missing out on so much fun in life and great connections. So what would you say to those people to help them in relationships?
Yeah, that's a great question. My advice at that point would be what we were talking about earlier. What you're wanting is the intimacy, right? What you're wanting is the into me you see. This is who I am. This is what I really like. This is what I really want, right? That's our goal. We want to be known for who we are and accepted for who we are and loved for who we are. So that's the goal. But if we don't feel comfortable enough to do that, if we're scared to do that, that means there's a disconnection earlier along in the flow. So if we go back through the flow, it's safety, trust, vulnerability, and intimacy. So if you want to be known and received exactly who you are for all of your kinky desires, but you aren't willing to be vulnerable, then we go back a step. Okay, do you trust your partner enough? Do you truly trust your partner enough that they're not going to laugh at you? Do you truly trust your partner enough that they're not going to judge you? Do you truly trust your partner enough that you can be who you are? And if the answer to that is no, then you have to go a step back. Okay, what are they doing or what am I doing to make this feel unsafe? So that would be my advice. Build safety. If you or your partner don't feel comfortable just being honest about, this is how you made me feel, or this is what I really like, or this really turns me on sexually, etc., that means that there is a disconnect. So just go back. Okay, if we don't have this intimacy, are they being vulnerable? Yeah. Okay, I'm not being vulnerable. Ooh, okay, so let's backtrack it. Okay, if I'm not feeling vulnerable, I clearly don't feel safe or don't trust in some way. So I would say dig into that. And I feel like a lot of people, perhaps in your age bracket, feel this way, perhaps because what we were talking about earlier with the swipe right culture.
That makes sense, yeah.
Where you're constantly judged. I mean, if you're on a dating app, you've been rejected so many times and you kind of know that subconsciously. Oh, people are going to reject me. People are going to reject me. And people are also, they can pass me by if they find someone else that they like better. And so it's this consumeristic mentality in our relationships that makes us really, really insecure. And so if we're bringing that consumeristic mentality into our relationships and treating our partner like a restaurant that I don't really want to eat at tonight, so I get to pick a different restaurant.
No, yeah, that's not a way to go about it.
Yeah, we devalue who we are. And so that would be the thing, is build safety. Like, it doesn't, with this whole hookup culture, like, it's like you're supposed to like find someone on the dating app and go out and then fuck. But you can't possibly build enough safety and trust with that person to merit the level of vulnerability and intimacy that you're giving, but that's what we do all the time. Mm-hmm. And so then we take that and we bring it into our relationships. And we expect this vulnerability and intimacy without the work of the safety and trust.
Interesting. So hookup culture, yeah. Huh. I'll remember that. Safety, trust, vulnerability, intimacy. And you consider sex part of like intimacy. So people that do hookup culture, they just haven't built that, and then they kind of ingrains in them. So they just project it upon whatever relationship they actually do end up getting in.
I see that connection. I mean, I'm not in their head and I'm not in their experience, so I'm not going to speak for them, but that's the connection that I see. Now, when it comes to, you know, if you genuinely feel okay just getting down with someone that you just met, great. But if you take that same mentality where everything is just rushed, the whole relational process is just expedited now, where we would normally take weeks to learn about someone, to get to know someone, and then we move to this next step. Now it's all kind of jumbled up, and we get to fuck a stranger if we want to. And so if we bring that into our relationship, like, oh, I get to be intimate, or I get to have sex, but I haven't actually invested the safety to do it, there's going to be disconnection down the path, down the line.
It makes a lot of sense. And that relates to a lot of what I see. People just, they don't fundamentally trust or feel safe with their partner. They feel like, cheating's rampant these days, or just, I don't know if you'd call that emotional abuse, but people just like shame each other in relationship. Not even for like, let's not even get to the kink part, just like small things, judgment. So how can you feel, safe and trusted and loved and enough to like be able to let go in those type of places? So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is the lack of transparency. Is there's nothing to hide if there's nothing to hide. But yet we don't take that mentality in our relationships. Like, there should never, ever be anything that you bring into your relationship that makes your partner feel insecure. And if they bring it to your attention that, yes, this is making me feel insecure, at that point you have a choice to choose what you were doing that's making your partner feel insecure, or choose your partner. And I feel like a lot of people don't go out of their way to build that transparency, so your partner knows there's nothing to hide. Nothing is being hidden from me. And so I think a big part of building that safety, building that trust, is perhaps give your partner, if you're in a marriage, especially if you're in a marriage, but if you're in, a long-term partnership, give your partner access to your phone. Everything that you do, they should be able to see, and vice versa. At any point, my partner can grab my phone. He knows my phone's password. He has all of the passwords to all of my accounts, because there's nothing to hide. And so that to me was something that like I felt I needed to do, to just go, I work in this kind of community that I don't ever want him to feel insecure.
Right.
For him to feel questioned, or like I'm comparing him, or any of that. And so to me, it's just like transparency. And that was the way to build that safety and trust. And so I would say that to all of you as well. If there's truly nothing to hide, there's nothing to hide. Be transparent with one another. If you want your partner to be intimate with you, extend intimacy to them. Show them you're safe.
That's a good answer. I'm curious if your answer is similar to someone that's maybe, instead of an insecure relationship, in a toxic relationship, where there's just unhealthy patterns, perhaps on one side, perhaps on both sides. What's the advice there, especially from your experience? Maybe you have a lot of insight on this one.
Yeah. That's a hard one, because the best abusers are the sneakiest. And that was definitely the case with me. It was very, very slow. And if you are in a toxic cycle, if you are in an abusive cycle, you know that the honeymoon phase is that great, glorious time of love bombing, where your love tank gets full, so that the perpetuation can, the abuse can perpetuate. And so it's tricky, because I think the first step is the victim seeing what's happening.
Realizing your problem is step one.
Yeah. And so that is tricky, because again, the worst or best, depending on how you look at it, abusers are really, really sneaky. So I think if we can educate more on, especially our young people, if we can educate them on, this is a healthy psyche. These are healthy behavioral patterns. These are healthy ways to relate and to connect. And these are toxic traits. These are marks of an abuser. This is how they communicate. This is how they operate. If we can raise awareness, bring about more education, and prevent those victims from getting involved in the first place, that to me is the key. But if you are already in that place, I would say, if you are the victim in that toxic situation, it's really tricky, because I don't know the limitations that have been placed on you, but you probably still have internet access. research narcissism, research sociopaths, and research narcissism. Research your ass off, and research codependency as well. I think a lot of victims are highly codependent, and our codependency makes us think we're doing something really good and really helpful. And so, yeah. So I think to all the victims, you still probably have internet access. Research narcissism, research sociopaths, research codependency. That to me was my point of illumination. Is I was actually doing a series for my community about the toxic traits of narcissists. And as I started doing more research, and as I started looking at not just the obvious things, but the really sneaky stuff, that was when I went, this is happening to me. I'm literally helping other women get out of it, but I'm in it. And that was the moment for me where I was like, okay, no. And so I think from the time of my realization to the time that I got free was less than a month, because that's how powerful knowledge is. Knowledge is power. So I would say to the victims, research. If something feels wrong, if something just chronically feels wrong, if you can't sleep, if you can't eat, if you have no rights, if you have no, car, if you have no access to money, if you can't see your family, if you can't see your friends, these are big red flags. And just research. I would also say to any victim, find a support system. A strong support system. Ideally, friends and family who can help you out financially, because a lot of victims in really bad situations, they don't have the funds to get free. So I would say research, get educated, and if you realize that these patterns are happening to you, find a support system, find people that can help you financially, and start making a plan to just get free. Even if it's, just to think straight and see clearly, just separation and get space and get freedom. To the toxic person in that situation, to the abuser in that situation, there's really not much you can do until they see that what they are doing is a violation of another human being's rights. Right. But to me, that's the sneakiest thing about narcissism, is they truly believe they're helping you. And as long as that's their narrative, you can't. And that's why it's the victim's responsibility to get free at that point.
No, I like your last point. A lot of people theorize that a lot of these narcissists, I don't know about sociopath, intentionally go out looking for victims, but a lot of the times, it starts off as a healthy relationship, but the pattern just emerge, and then in the end it's controlling. They're like, I'm helping you, without me you'd be nothing, this type, and they believe it. And until you're able to be honest with yourself, hey, I'm kind of being a shit person now, which is harder to do than most people think. Like for some people that'll just be too hard, so they hide behind it and they will never come to that realization. So I like that you said that. That's powerful.
That's something that I don't tolerate anymore. And that's why pretty much everything that you will get from my community about healthy dominance is to make that delineation, because I spent almost 8 years of my life just wasting away. I was so unhealthy. It was so unhealthy by the time I got out. I was 80 something pounds. I mean, about to be hospitalized. Damn. Going on the bridge of a complete psychotic breakdown. And if I can, I got emotional. If I can save any person, not just women, if I can save any person from going through what I went through, I will do it. And that's why I get so feisty about abusers and narcissists versus healthy dominance.
No, I'm glad to hear. I'm glad that you got out of it. You look a lot better now.
Oh man, it was absolutely what you said. It's a slow boil, like boiling a frog. Isn't that the analogy? Boiling a frog? Yeah, they don't realize it until yeah, absolutely. So, did I cover everything?
I think so. No, this was great. Pretty much ran through the list. We had a good tangent, some stuff I didn't even write down. Like it was really good.
Good, good. Well, do you have
And
anything else for me?
from on my side, I'm good. Anything else you wanted to add or mention or something?
I just think your community needs to know how amazing you are. And I think
Thank
your
you.
community needs to know what a grounded, wonderful leader that they have. So, Kyle's community, do you have a special community name for your people?
No, it's just Kyle Fall. I have a Discord, YouTube, and Instagram. Just getting in the process of building it. So
We need to come up with a cute community, not a cute, because you're like badass community name. We need to come up with a badass community name. Like mine is the LX Army. You need something like, I don't know, like I want to do something like with your name.
Hmm. That's a good question. I'm not good at branding, so I'll have to think
But
on that.
anyway, I've distracted myself. But anyway, Kyle's community, you guys have an amazing. I should look at there. You have an amazing leader. You have an amazing person here, and I'm just so honored and blessed that we got this time together today. Thank you so much for reaching out, and I hope that I thoroughly answered your questions and kept you and your audience entertained.
No, you were great. Thanks
I
for
did.
coming on in the kind words. That's much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And anytime you want to do this again, I would totally be down.
Sounds good. I'll take you up on that. So if people want to look into you or your community, where can they find you? What's the best way to
Oh
reach out?
yeah. Okay. So I love my people do this for me all the time. They're like, Miss L, please tell everyone that you just wrote a book. I'm like, oh, damn it. Okay. So if you want to get in touch with me and my community, I have a website, misslx.com. You can also get in touch with me on Instagram at lxerotica. YouTube, it's, the YouTube link, the channel, and then my name. And I think it's just LX on YouTube, but you can search Miss LX on YouTube. I'm there too. And let's see. I'm on YouTube. I have the website. Instagram. What else am I forgetting? Oh, Pinterest, and I also have my book on Amazon. Did I cover everything, Kyle? What about you? How do we get in touch with you?
Me, Kyle G Fall on Instagram, on YouTube, Kyle Fall. That's pretty much the two big ones from there, and from there, Twitter, Kyle G Fall.
All right, I'm not on Twitter. I don't tweet.
It's good. People don't like it. But to me, it's super interesting. You have fascinating discussions on there. People get emotionally charged. They like spew some stuff. You can have some very unique discussions on Twitter.
So, are you a pot stirrer on Twitter?
Kind of. I like to say like controversial questions just to see what people say. Not really because of what I believe, but the answers that you get out of people, they're very like raw, and like you don't get that on a lot of social media. So to me, it's a good platform.
Wow, I don't trust myself on Twitter, so I'll just leave that to you. But I will go give you a follow. Thank you so much for a wonderful afternoon, sweetie.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Okay, so do I just hit end record now?
Yeah, let's just do that. I'll cut this part out. It's all good.